The arrogance of the Galactic Order. For many years, the Galactic Order believed they had complete control over the stars, and while they respected powerful civilizations like the Velari, the Zenthari, or the Torcan, they laughed at planets like Earth, because to them, humans were just noisy, emotional creatures living on a small blue planet that had never joined the Galactic Council, had no interstellar alliances, and had never shown real strength beyond their solar system. In one of the High Council meetings, held in the shining crystal tower above the skies of Droskar Prime, representatives from different species sat in their golden chairs, speaking proudly of their achievements, while one of them, a tall and four-eyed being from the Terek species, raised his voice and said with a smirk that Earth was quiet because it knew better than to speak among giants, and his words caused laughter to echo across the room as others agreed that humanity had grown soft and peaceful after their world wars, forgetting how to bite or strike back when threatened. The truth, however, was far from what the Galactic Order assumed, because Earth was not silent out of fear, but because it had chosen to watch, to wait, and to prepare, as deep beneath the surface of the moon, inside bases that even the most advanced alien scans could not detect, Earth's secret defense program had been growing in strength, guided by the minds of soldiers, scientists, and strategists who knew that one day the silence of Earth would be mistaken for weakness, and that mistake would cost the galaxy more than it could imagine. General Silva, the Supreme Commander of Earth Defense Protocol, stood before a massive screen showing real-time data from hundreds of surveillance satellites scattered across nearby star systems, and as she listened to the intercepted conversation from the council chamber, she didn't smile, she didn't frown. She simply turned to her team and said in a calm voice that now they were laughing, but soon they would listen carefully to the silence they had ignored for so long. Meanwhile, a small fleet from the Ordak species, known for their pride and cruelty, was already on its way to Earth's region. Their mission simple: to test Earth's defenses, to fly close and fire a warning shot at the Mars research colony, to show the humans that silence was not protection, and that the Galactic Order would no longer tolerate Earth's independence or refusal to obey the Council's rules. As the Ordak fleet approached Mars, the humans monitoring from the hidden Luna command base stayed quiet, recording every movement, every heat signature, and every communication wave coming from the alien ships, and when the Ordak fired a single plasma torpedo that struck the outer wall of the unmanned colony, destroying it in a bright explosion, the alien captain laughed and said Earth would remain silent like a dog beaten too many times. But inside the Luna base, there was no panic, no anger, just silence. Back on Earth, deep under the Arctic ice, inside Facility Echo 9, a large door opened with a hiss, and behind it stood a black warship, sleek, massive, and shaped like the shadow of a bird, silent and deadly, hidden for years in case the galaxy ever forgot who humans were, and today it was time to remind them. General Silva gave the order without raising her voice, telling the AI command system to activate Protocol Raven, and as the lights turned red and the engines of the warship roared to life without making a sound, the ship lifted from its cradle and launched silently into space, vanishing from sensors the moment it left Earth's orbit. Somewhere in deep space, the Ordak fleet laughed again, their sensors showing nothing, their scans clear, their confidence high. But if they had known what had just been unleashed, they would not have laughed. Back at the council chamber, the Kaxirek representative received a message on his personal holo-device, showing him a video clip that lasted only 5 seconds, an image of the destroyed Mars colony, followed by one simple human word appearing in red letters across the screen. Noted. Suddenly, the room grew quiet, and though no one spoke, a strange chill passed through the council. They had made a mistake, but they didn't know how big. And above them, far beyond their sensors, the silent warship continued its journey. The Ordak fleet, confident in their superiority, didn't notice the faint ripple in space. They were more concerned with their mission: to intimidate, to teach the humans a lesson they would never forget. But as their ships moved closer to the outer edge of Earth's solar system, something strange happened. Their advanced sensors, their best technology, failed to detect the threat that was already heading toward them. Far away from the Council's view, and far beyond the reach of any alien species technology, Earth's hidden warships powered up, their engines humming low but steady, each ship cloaked under a shroud of advanced camouflage. They had waited for this moment, the moment when the galaxy would make the mistake of underestimating humanity. And now they would be reminded that Earth had learned more than how to survive. General Silva stood in the command center, her face lit by the glow of a holographic display, showing the approaching Ordak fleet. She leaned forward, her fingers tapping a steady rhythm on the surface of the command table. The message was clear. Earth would no longer stay silent. And this time, the galaxy would listen. The entire fleet was on high alert as the first ship in the Earth Defense Squadron, designated Raven 1, entered the outskirts of the Ordak fleet's detection range. The Ordak ships, known for their advanced tracking systems and deadly firepower, still couldn't sense the Raven. It was as if the ship had melted into the fabric of space itself. The humans had learned from the best, from every secret and every unknown aspect of technology that had been hidden in plain sight. Meanwhile, aboard the Ordak flagship, Captain Talagor stood with his arms crossed, watching the sensors. The fleet was ready for battle. It would be a swift strike. The humans would realize that silence meant nothing. But as the minutes passed, Talagor's confidence began to erode. The sensor logs were showing strange disturbances, but they were too subtle, too faint to identify. He ordered his engineers to perform a quick diagnostic, convinced that the scanners were malfunctioning. But when they confirmed that everything was running at full capacity, unease spread among the crew. "I'll be damned if these primitive humans have something better than we do," Talagor muttered under his breath, though he couldn't hide the slight tremor in his voice. Something was off. Suddenly, a low, vibrating hum filled the control room, followed by a sharp, high-pitched sound as Raven 1, a ship designed for one purpose, and one purpose only, fired its first shot. A piercing beam of energy, more intense than anything the Ordak had seen, shot out of the Raven's front cannon. It was so fast that it barely registered on the alien sensors before it hit one of the smaller Ordak warships, cracking its hull open like an egg. The explosion sent shockwaves throughout the fleet, sending debris scattering across the empty expanse of space. The Ordak ship, once proud and towering, was now a burning, twisted wreck. The crew of the flagship stared in disbelief. Talagor's mouth hung open as the communications officer shouted orders to fire back. But it was too late. Raven 1 had already vanished into the shadows of space once more, leaving the Ordak fleet shaken and unprepared for the next strike. On Earth, inside Luna Command, General Silva's eyes never left the holographic display as she watched the destruction unfold. She turned to the communications officer and said softly, "Initiate Phase 2. A message was sent from Earth's hidden facilities. It was short, cold, and direct. "You've just lost your first ship." The message wasn't directed to the Ordak alone. It was for the entire galaxy to hear. Earth had declared its response, and nothing, no fleet, no council, could stop it. Back on the Ordak flagship, Talagor's hand shook as he looked at the carnage that had just unfolded. His fleet, once feared by so many, had just been struck down by a single ship. His bravado had vanished, replaced by a deep, sinking feeling that they were facing an enemy unlike any they had encountered before. "We were wrong," he muttered, though no one was brave enough to contradict him. But there was no time for regret. The fleet had to respond. Orders flew through the control room, each officer scrambling to react. But it was too late. Another ship from the Earth fleet, Raven 2, emerged from behind the shadows, unleashing another devastating burst of energy. This time, the blast struck an entire section of the Ordak flagship. The ship's massive structure groaned as the outer layer buckled under the force. The lights flickered. Panic spread like wildfire among the crew. And still, the Earth warships remained a ghost. Silent, elusive, unseen. They would strike when least expected and vanish before any retaliation could be mounted. Earth was not just fighting back. It was teaching a lesson that no one in the galaxy would ever forget. The messages sent back to the Galactic Council were simple and filled with an undeniable promise. Humanity is no longer silent. And now, the galaxy will remember what happens when Earth responds. As the Ordak flagship continued to shake, Talagor realized with dawning horror that the worst was yet to come. The Ordak fleet, once a symbol of strength and dominance, now found itself in disarray. Their once pristine formation had collapsed into chaos as Raven 1 and Raven 2 launched strike after strike, weaving through the void of space with precision and speed. They had made the Ordak fleet pay dearly for underestimating humanity's resolve. As the smoke from the second explosion cleared, Talagor stood motionless at the center of the flagship's command room. The once bustling deck was now eerily quiet, save for the frantic whispers of his crew, who were desperately trying to regain control of their systems. The calm after the storm seemed to mock him. In his mind, he could still hear the haunting echo of the blast, one that had cost them another ship, another piece of their once glorious fleet. How could this happen? Talagor whispered, his voice barely audible. His fingers trembled as he scrolled through his tactical display, searching for any trace of their attackers, but they had already vanished. Earth's warships, unlike any the galaxy had ever encountered, had become ghosts, appearing from nowhere, delivering swift destruction, and then disappearing into the void before the enemy could even react. "Captain," a voice broke through Talagor's stupor. The communications officer, a young but sharp-eyed officer named Terran, stepped forward, her voice steady despite the chaos surrounding her. "The rest of the fleet is requesting immediate guidance. We need to retaliate. We need to strike back." Talagor's gaze snapped to her, but his mind remained distant, lost in thought. How could they have been so wrong about humanity? For centuries, the Ordak and their allies had conquered countless civilizations, leaving behind a trail of shattered empires. The humans, with their small, insignificant planet, had always been viewed as nothing more than a curiosity, a species too primitive to pose any real threat. But now, as the remnants of their once proud fleet drifted helplessly in the blackness of space, Talagor realized that they had misjudged humanity. Horribly. Terran's voice cut through his musings once more. "Captain, the Galactic Council is demanding a response. They want action. They will not tolerate any delay." The Council, the highest authority in the galaxy, the beings who had always looked down on Earth as a mere footnote in the galaxy's history. Talagor's mind raced. The Council would not be pleased with this turn of events. If Earth continued to strike with such efficiency, it would send shockwaves through the galaxy, perhaps even change the balance of power forever. "We will not be humiliated," Talagor growled, his voice growing cold and dangerous. "Prepare to launch all remaining ships. We will hunt them down." Despite his fierce words, a nagging doubt lingered in the pit of his stomach. He knew that no matter how many ships they sent, no matter how many weapons they unleash, they were up against something far beyond their comprehension. The humans had taken a stand, and now there would be no turning back. Meanwhile, back on Earth, General Silva stood in Luna Command, staring at the holographic display that showed the position of the Ordak fleet. She watched as the lights of the enemy fleet flickered dimly, their movements erratic as they scrambled to regroup. Her hand rested on the edge of the command table, and for a moment she allowed herself to breathe, but only for a brief second. The victory was important, but it was just the beginning. This was not a war they could win with only 2 ships. The humans had been silent for too long, but now they were awake, and they would not be silenced again. "We've sent our message," General Silva said, her voice resolute. "Now we must send them the real one." A series of commands were issued, and in moments, the entire fleet, hidden beneath the surface of Earth's moons, and in deep space stations, began to stir. Hundreds of ships, all crafted with human ingenuity, powered up. It was time to make their next move. Humanity would show the galaxy that they had more than just advanced weaponry. They had the will to fight, to survive, and to win. On the bridge of Raven 1, Captain Kane looked out into the stars, his expression stoic. He knew the mission was far from over. Prepare for Phase 3. It's time to show them what Earth can do when we fight together. The Ordak fleet, now fully mobilized, moved into position. Talgor's orders were clear: strike the humans with everything they had. But even as he issued the commands, a sinking feeling lingered in his chest. The humans were not only striking back, they were hitting harder than anyone had ever expected. Their strikes had been precise, deadly, and swift, like nothing the galaxy had ever seen. "Open all channels to the fleet," Talgor said, his voice tinged with a rare sense of urgency. "Tell them to attack with all force. We cannot afford another misstep." As the Ordak fleet surged forward, weapons charged and shields raised, Talgor's thoughts turned to the humans. The odds were against them, yet they fought with a fury he had never imagined. He had underestimated them, underestimated their resolve, their drive. Now he wondered if it was already too late. But there was no turning back now. The fleet was locked in, and the war had only just begun. The galaxy was about to learn what it meant to provoke humanity. The repercussions of this mistake would echo throughout the universe for generations. As the battle approached, one thing was certain: humanity had no intention of being a passive participant. They had made their choice, and the Ordak were about to experience the full weight of Earth's wrath. The quiet of space was shattered as Earth's warships surged forward, their engines glowing bright against the vast, dark emptiness. The Raven 1 and Raven 2, now joined by the full force of Earth's fleet, cut through the void like predators hunting their prey. Each ship, powered by humanity's ingenuity, was a testament to their unyielding will and ability to adapt and evolve. The warships were sleek, fast, and deadly, designed for one purpose: to defend Earth, and, if necessary, to show the galaxy that humanity would never again be ignored. General Silva stood at the heart of Luna Command, her eyes fixed on the massive holographic display before her. The enemy fleet, a once unstoppable force, was now in retreat. Yet even as she watched the movements of the Ordak forces on the screen, she knew this was just the beginning. The fleet was coming, and the true test was yet to come. "All ships, engage at will," she ordered, her voice calm but filled with an intensity that radiated through every word. "We fight as one. Protect each other and watch for their counterattacks. The galaxy will hear us today." On the Raven 1, Captain Kane's face was set with determination as his fingers danced over the controls. He was not only a captain, he was a symbol of humanity's refusal to bow to anyone, even those with more advanced technology. The Ordak had made a grave mistake in underestimating them. Now they would learn what it meant to challenge Earth. "Ready the weapons systems," Kane barked, his eyes locked on the view screen. "Prepare to engage the first wave. These are no longer just humans fighting back. We are humanity, and we will win this." The fleet moved as one, each ship connected to the others in perfect harmony. The communication systems buzzed as messages passed between the vessels, each captain giving their crews the same directive: fight to win. The Ordak had crossed a line, and now humanity would make them regret it. Meanwhile, Talgor stood in the heart of the Ordak flagship, watching as the human warships advanced toward them. His hand clenched tightly around the railing. He had expected a fight, but not this level of coordination, not this level of rage. The humans had been silent for far too long, and now their silence had given birth to something far more terrifying than the Ordak had imagined. "Initiate all attack formations," Talgor commanded, his voice booming through the flagship's command room. The officers scrambled to respond, sending orders to their subordinates. The Ordak had long relied on brute force, but against the humans' strategic precision, it felt inadequate. Talgor had been wrong. Humans were not weak. They were strong. And now, the galaxy would pay for their arrogance. The first wave of human warships collided with the Ordak fleet in a fiery explosion of lasers and missiles. Raven 1 and Raven 2 were the first to engage, darting through the chaos, their shields glowing as they absorbed the deadly fire from the Ordak ships. In retaliation, the Ordak unleashed wave after wave of attacks, but the humans were faster, smarter, and their warships were built for agility rather than sheer power. "Target the engines," Captain Kane instructed, his voice steady even in the heart of the battle. "We're not here to just fight. We're here to win. We end this now." His orders were precise. Every missile launched, every laser fired, had a single purpose: disable the enemy's ability to fight back. The Ordak might have more ships, but humanity had something they didn't: resolve. And the Ordak were beginning to feel the weight of that resolve. For every ship they lost, for every strike they failed to land, they were pushed further back, retreating into the unknown. On Luna Command, General Silva watched with a sense of grim satisfaction. Her fleet was holding strong, but she knew the Ordak were far from finished. The initial skirmish had been in their favor, but this was a war, not a battle, and it would take everything they had to secure victory. "Status report," she ordered sharply. "Captain Kane's team is maintaining their offensive," came the report from the communications officer. "The enemy fleet is in disarray, but they are regrouping and preparing for another strike. Their numbers are still overwhelming, but they're losing cohesion. We're pushing them back." Silva nodded. The tide was turning, but she could feel the weight of what was to come. This was only the beginning of what would be a long, hard conflict. But even as she prepared herself for the battles to come, she knew one thing: humanity was not going to lose. Not this time. Back on the battlefield, the Ordak fleet was in disarray. They had underestimated Earth's capabilities, and now they were paying the price. Talgor's flagship took a direct hit from one of the human warships, its outer hull splintering under the assault. The ship shook violently as alarms blared throughout the corridors. Talgor had to admit it. He had never faced an enemy like this. These humans weren't just fighting to survive. They were fighting for something far deeper. They were fighting for their home, for their future, and for their place in the galaxy. "How long until reinforcements arrive?" Talgor demanded. "We don't have time, Captain," one of the officers replied, his voice trembling. "They're too close. We need to retreat." Talgor's mind raced. They had been so sure of their victory, so certain that humanity would cower at the sight of their might. Now, as the enemy pressed in closer, he realized just how wrong they had been. "This is not over," Talgor muttered, his face dark with rage. "We fight to the last ship. If they want war, we'll give them more." But even as he spoke those words, a part of him knew the truth. The Ordak had underestimated humanity. And now, the entire galaxy was about to learn the consequences of that mistake. With every blast that rang out across the battlefield, humanity was proving something. They would never back down, no matter the odds. This was not just a war of ships and weapons. It was a war of will. And humanity's will was stronger than anyone had ever anticipated. The galaxy would soon understand. Earth's silence was over, and there was no going back. The battle raged on, with the human fleet pressing forward in a relentless push. The Ordak ships, once filled with arrogant confidence, now faltered under the onslaught of the warships from Earth. The black void of space was alive with the sounds of laser fire, explosions, and the occasional crackle of radio transmissions, human and alien alike, echoing the tension that filled the air. Captain Kane's voice cut through the chaos, giving orders with the same calm precision he had maintained since the first shot had been fired. "Focus on their command ship," he ordered, his eyes scanning the enemy fleet. The Ordak flagship, the heart of their forces, had to be neutralized if humanity had any hope of ending this conflict. The ship was large, heavily armored, and brimming with alien soldiers, but it was vulnerable, like everything else. If they could disable it, the Ordak would lose their ability to control their remaining forces. On board Raven 1, the crew was ready. The ship had been damaged in the earlier skirmishes, but it was still operational. The shields flickered, but they held. The weapons systems hummed with power. And the crew had one goal: to take down the Ordak flagship and end the fight. There was no retreat, no fallback. The time for hesitation had passed. They would win, or they would die trying. "All systems are ready, Captain," Lieutenant Sarah said, her voice steady but tense. "We're locked onto the flagship, preparing to fire." "Do it," Kane ordered. His hands gripped the controls firmly as the enemy flagship loomed larger on the view screen. In the heart of the Ordak command ship, Talgor watched in disbelief as the human warships closed in, targeting his flagship. His knuckles whitened around the console as he barked orders to his officers, but deep down, he knew it was too late. The humans had already proven they were not to be underestimated. And now, they were coming for his ship. "Get those shields up," Talgor shouted, panic creeping into his voice. "Prepare the defense systems. Fire everything we have at them." But it was too little, too late. The human fleet had synchronized their attack. Laser blasts tore into the Ordak flagship shields, pushing them to their limits. The hull groaned under the pressure as explosions rocked the structure. The flagship's weapons fired back, but they were erratic, missing their targets. The Ordak were disorganized, losing cohesion under the relentless assault. Captain Kane watched as his ship's weapons hit their mark. Raven 1 unleashed a barrage of missiles, each one finding its target with deadly precision. The missiles exploded upon impact, and the Ordak flagship began to list, smoke billowing from its sides. Kane didn't blink. His eyes never left the screen. There was no joy in what was happening. This wasn't about vengeance. This was about survival. About proving to the galaxy that humanity would never again be silenced. The flagship's shields flickered, and then, with a deafening explosion, they collapsed. The Ordak flagship was now vulnerable. Kane's heart raced, but he remained calm. "Finish them off," he ordered. "Concentrate fire on the bridge. No mercy." As Raven 1 unleashed its final decisive blow, Talgor stood frozen, watching as his ship, his pride, began to tear apart under the human assault. His soldiers scrambled to maintain control, but it was futile. The warship was dying, and with it their hopes of defeating the humans. "Retreat," Talgor screamed, but no one was listening anymore. The crew of the flagship was abandoning their posts, their loyalty crumbling under the weight of failure. The once mighty Ordak fleet, now a broken shadow of its former self, had no choice but to turn and flee. The human fleet did not let up. Raven 1 and the other ships pursued with a determination that matched their enemies' desperation. The Ordak had been humiliated. The galaxy, which had once viewed them as invincible, now watched as their retreat turned into a rout. Humanity had struck back, and it was clear no one would ever look at Earth the same way again. On Luna Command, General Silva's eyes glistened with a fierce pride. The message had been sent. The galaxy would never forget what had just transpired. The humans had fought, they had won, and they had made their mark on the cosmos. She had led them into this war, but now she watched as the survivors, the humans who had endured years of silence, stood tall. And it wasn't just for Earth. This victory had been for every human who had ever lived, for every human who had ever faced an enemy with no help, no support. The victory was a testament to their spirit, to their survival. "General, the enemy flagship is disabled," one of her officers reported. "They are in full retreat. We've won." General Silva allowed herself a small smile, but she knew this was not the end. The Ordak would regroup, they would rebuild, and they would come back. But humanity had proven one irrefutable fact. They were not a species to be ignored. And next time, the galaxy would think twice before underestimating Earth. "We've won today, but the war is far from over," Silva said, her voice steady and resolute. "We've shown them what we're capable of. Now, we build, and when they return, we will be ready." As the shattered remnants of the Ordak fleet drifted into the distance, humanity stood victorious. The warships returned to Earth, their crews battered but unbowed. The story of this battle, of this moment, would spread across the galaxy. Humanity had fought not just to survive, but to show the stars that they were not alone in the vastness of space. The warships had spoken, and the universe had heard. Humanity had proven its place in the galaxy, and they would never again be forgotten.